Grace Taylor's feet hurt in places she didn't know could ache. Her scrubs were still damp from the freezing rain outside, and her phone buzzed uselessly in her pocket. Another late text from her younger brother asking if she remembered to buy ramen. She didn't. She could barely remember her own name after the back-to-back ER shifts. The Cincinnati airport arrivals curb was chaos. Valet horns, cold mist, that low winter sky that made everything feel gray. But somehow, in the middle of it all, a sleek black SUV pulled up just as she stepped outside. And it looked exactly like the Uber she'd ordered. "Grace?" the driver called, barely glancing up from the app. She nodded, even though she wasn't sure she could form real words. The door swung open, the warmth of heated leather and the faint smell of cedar and mint hitting her senses like a hug. She slid in with a sigh, curling into the back seat like it was a hotel bed. She didn't even hear the front door open. "Well, you're not my usual type of business partner." The voice was dry, smooth, male, amused. Grace's eyes shot open. In the passenger seat beside her was a man, probably late 30s, early 40s, sharp jaw, messy hair like he'd just taken off a beanie. His suit was too expensive to guess at, the kind of face you only see in fortune profiles or on the back cover of Forbes. Her voice came out like a croak. "You're not my Uber driver." He raised an eyebrow, clearly fighting a smile. "I'm pretty sure I'm not." The driver snorted from the front seat, but kept going. "I'm so sorry. I thought—" She scrambled to sit up, her embarrassment hitting in full force. My Uber was supposed to be a black SUV, and it pulled up, and I've been awake for 20 hours, and—" "It's okay," he said quickly, holding up his hand. "You looked like you needed the ride more than I did. Besides, I never ignore fate." She blinked. "What?" The driver chuckled. "He's a romantic. Just say thank you and let him have his movie moment." The man beside her looked over then, and their eyes finally locked for more than a second. Something flickered. Grace hated how her body reacted to it. She didn't have time for this, not with a teenage brother waiting on her paycheck or a hospital that could barely keep staff in trauma care. But still, something about him made her feel seen, like she'd been invisible to the world all day and only now had someone actually looked at her. "I'll get out," she said, grabbing for the handle. "Wait." His voice had dropped, warm now, real. "Where were you headed?" She hesitated. "North Side, Clifton." "That's 25 minutes from here. I've got a lake place in Blue Ash. It's along the way. I'll drop you. No big deal." She narrowed her eyes. "You sure? I'm not trying to be some kind of story." He tilted his head. "You kind of already are." The car eased onto the freeway. Grace leaned her head back, exhaling for the first time in hours. "So," he asked gently, "you always hijack strangers' cars, or just when you're sleep-deprived and adorable?" She turned to glare. "I'm not adorable. I'm exhausted and possibly concussed." "From what?" She laughed dryly. "Being a nurse in a hospital with a broken coffee machine? That sounds like a lawsuit." "That sounds like my Tuesday." He chuckled. "I'm Landon, by the way. Landon Reed." Her heart stuttered. Reed Technologies. The name clicked. She'd read something about him. Tech startup turned billion-dollar cybersecurity empire. Reclusive, quiet, philanthropic, single. Never seen with the same woman twice. And now he was in a car with her, handing her a bottle of water like they were just two normal people stuck in traffic. "Grace Taylor," I said, feeling suddenly underdressed in her damp hoodie and hospital badge. I work nights. Try not to die while I'm clocked in, okay? He grinned. The ride should have been awkward, but it wasn't. It was quiet, comfortable, intimate in a strange, suspended way. Halfway to Clifton, she found herself asking, "Why do you really want to take me home? You don't know me." Landon looked over, serious for the first time. "Because you're the first person today who didn't want anything from me. You just wanted a ride." That stopped her. She looked away, out the window, throat suddenly tight. They pulled up to her apartment complex, just past the faded blue mailbox and the lamp post that flickered out every few seconds. "Not exactly lake property," I muttered. "It's honest," he said. She glanced over, not expecting that. "Yeah, well, it's mine." A pause. His eyes softened. "Grace?" "Yeah?" "You want me to walk you to the door?" My heart did something stupid. I almost said no, but instead I nodded. They walked quietly under the buzzing street lamp. At her door, she turned to thank him, keys clutched in her hand like armor. "Landon, thank you for not thinking I was crazy or dangerous." He smiled gently. "You're something, Grace Taylor. I just don't know what yet." And before she could respond, before she could read into it, he brushed his thumb across the side of her hand as he passed her the water bottle again. Just a touch, barely a second, but it was warm, real. A thread pulled tight between two strangers who, 5 minutes ago, didn't know the other existed. Then he left. She stood in the doorway long after the tail lights disappeared. What she didn't know was that Landon Reed sat in the driveway of his lake house for a full 20 minutes later, staring at his hands, and for the first time in a long time, wondering if fate was still real. Grace didn't expect to hear from him again. That's just not how life worked for people like her. You don't accidentally ride in a billionaire's SUV and then get a call back. You tell the story to your coworkers on night shift over vending machine coffee and laugh it off like a fever dream. But then her phone buzzed at 7:13 the next morning, right as she was falling into bed. "You left your umbrella. I'd like to return it. Over coffee?" She stared at the message for a full 2 minutes, her brain buffering like a Wi-Fi signal in the rain. She had left her umbrella, a cheap Walgreens one that barely worked. Most guys wouldn't have even noticed, but he had. And coffee. With him. Her gut reaction was to say no, not because she didn't want to, but because she wanted too much. And Grace had a policy about things that felt too good to be true. Don't touch them. They break. She was coming off another shift. Hair up, face tired, hoodie zipped halfway. She was grabbing a chocolate milk and a $2 breakfast burrito, praying it wasn't frozen solid in the middle. And there he was, standing at the checkout with a coffee and a bag of trail mix, looking completely out of place and completely unbothered by it. He looked over and smiled. "Still raining," he said, gesturing to her umbrella. She almost dropped the chocolate milk. "You're stalking me now?" she asked, but there was no bite to it. He shrugged casually. "Maybe I just like terrible gas station coffee." She raised an eyebrow. "You've got access to, like, imported beans from a volcano somewhere, and you're here?" He glanced around. "I don't know. This place has character and fluorescent lighting. It's got charm." She tried to hold back a laugh, but it bubbled up anyway. "You are weird, Landon Reed." He grinned. "You remembered my name." Hard to forget someone who almost gave me a heart attack in the back of an SUV. He held the door open for her as they stepped back into the drizzle. Let me make it up to you. Just a walk. You pick the direction. She hesitated. He noticed. I'm not trying to impress you, Grace. I'm trying to get to know you. That's it. It was the honesty that got her. The quiet in his voice. No grand gesture, no pressure, just him. So she nodded. All right, but if this turns into some Lifetime movie plot, I get to be the one who saves you. He laughed. Deal. They walked through the park that bordered the high school track field. It was muddy and gray, with that Ohio chill in the air that makes you forget what July feels like. They talked about nothing. Work, favorite diners. He admitted to secretly loving old-school diners with laminated menus and glass syrup bottles. She told him about her brother Theo and how he wanted to study engineering but hated math. He listened, really listened, not the fake nodding while checking a watch kind. And when she mentioned how she picked up extra shifts to help with college apps, his jaw tensed just slightly. Do you ever do anything just for you? He asked. Grace stopped walking. I don't really have the luxury of that. He nodded slowly, like he had expected the answer, but hated hearing it. They ended the walk at a food truck with 3 Yelp stars and a line of people that said otherwise. He ordered for them, without asking, tater tots with cheese sauce, street corn with extra lime. She eyed him curiously. You don't look like a guy who eats carbs. He bit into a tot and grinned. You don't look like a girl who forgets her umbrella in a billionaire's car, but here we are. That night, Grace sat on her small couch with her feet curled under her, texting him pictures of her brother's terrible attempt at microwave lasagna and trying not to overthink what this was. She couldn't explain it. Landon didn't feel like a billionaire. He felt like a safe place. Like that rare kind of man who notices things without making you feel small. But still, there was a wall in her heart. She'd built in after their parents died, after she became part mom, part big sister, part survival machine. You don't let yourself dream when rent's due and your brother needs a coat. And Landon was the opposite of survival. He was wanting. He invited her to his lake place the following weekend. Not in a flashy way, no private chef or catered setup, just a text. I make a mean grilled cheese. You in? When she arrived, the house was quiet, modern, clean, almost too neat, like no one lived there for real, except for the fire pit in the back and the dog bed tucked in the corner. You have a dog? She asked, dropping her overnight bag near the doorway. He smiled, a little sadly. Used to. A golden retriever, Charlie. He died last year. Sometimes I still think I hear him at night. The vulnerability hit her like a gust of wind, sudden, gentle, disarming. She nodded. We had a beagle when I was a kid. He followed me everywhere, even into the bathroom. Sounds loyal. He was, obnoxious, but yeah, loyal. That night, they sat outside by the fire, sharing grilled cheese and hot cider, wrapped in separate blankets, but closer than they realized. He told her about his best friend from college, the one who helped start the company, who died suddenly in a hiking accident. How he hadn't been able to step into their office building since. She told him about staying up with her mom the night before she passed, how her little brother thought she was the strongest person in the world, and how she never let him know she still cried in the laundry room sometimes. There was a moment of silence after that, the kind that wraps around you like a hug. He looked at her and said, You don't have to be strong all the time, Grace. And she whispered, You don't have to be alone, Landon. Neither of them moved, but something did. When she left the next morning, he walked her to her car and gently tucked her hair behind her ear before she got in. It wasn't a kiss, Not yet, but it felt more intimate than anything. As she drove away, her hands were shaking on the wheel because she'd felt it. Whatever this was, it wasn't nothing. And maybe, just maybe, it could be something. Grace hadn't planned to see Landon that night. It was Friday, and she was supposed to be doing laundry, catching up on overdue bills, and helping Theo write an essay on the water crisis in Flint. But sometime after dinner, a storm rolled in. One of those deep Midwest thunderstorms that shakes the windows and smells like rain on hot pavement. She was standing in the kitchen, staring at the lightning outside, when Theo walked in, barefoot and holding his laptop. "Don't be mad," he said, giving her that sheepish look that always came before something risky. "But I emailed that college admissions guy. Told him you were working doubles to help me apply. He wants to talk to you." She blinked. "Why would you?" "Because you keep doing everything for everyone and acting like it's no big deal. I don't want you to miss out on everything because of me." She froze, the rain pelting the windows behind her. Theo's voice softened. "You ever think maybe it's okay to let someone take care of you for once?" She didn't say anything, just hugged him. And 20 minutes later, with her hoodie thrown over a wrinkled t-shirt and no real plan, she got in her car and drove to Landon's lake house. Storm or no storm. She didn't even text first. The house was quiet when she got there, except for the wind knocking at the windows. A single light was on in the living room, flickering soft yellow through the glass. Her knock was hesitant. She wasn't sure what she was hoping for. Maybe that he wouldn't be there? Maybe that he would. The door opened almost immediately. Landon stood there barefoot, in jeans and a black t-shirt, eyes wide and surprised, but not in a bad way. "Hey," he said, like he wasn't sure she was real. "Hey," she replied, suddenly shy. "I wasn't expecting—" "I know, I should have texted, but She stopped, blowing out a breath. "I needed air, and for some reason, this was the only place I wanted to be." Something in his face shifted, like he understood exactly what she meant without needing to decode it. "Come in," he said softly, stepping aside. She followed him inside. The house smelled like cinnamon and cedarwood and something baking. He glanced back at her, a little sheepish. "Snickerdoodles," he said. "I get weird when it storms." Grace smiled. "Same." There was a long moment as they stood there, just watching each other, like the space between them had its own heartbeat. She towed off her sneakers near the rug, and Landon handed her a dry hoodie from the coat rack. She slipped it on, realizing with the jolt it still smelled like him, clean and warm and just a little like pine. He led her into the living room, where a fire was already going. The lights flickered once as thunder cracked outside. She jumped slightly. "You okay?" he asked, already moving toward her. She nodded, then sat on the couch, curling her legs under her. "I used to love stars when I was a kid, but now they just feel heavy." Landon sat beside her, close, but not too close. "Yeah, like something's about to happen and you don't know what." They both stared at the flames for a while. "You ever feel like your life's just paused?" Grace asked, her voice low. "Like you're moving, but you're not really going anywhere." "All the time," Landon said without missing a beat. She turned toward him. "That surprise you?" "A little," she admitted. "You've built an empire. You've got more houses than I have shoes." He smiled, but it was a tired smile. "Yeah, but none of them felt like home until recently." Her breath caught. He didn't say it was her, but he didn't have to. And that was when something shifted again. The kind where two people realize they're sitting on opposite sides of the same emotional fence, and they're both ready to climb over. He reached for her hand, slowly, gently, and she let him. His thumb brushed over the top of hers, like he was memorizing it. "I don't know what this is," he said, voice quieter than before. "But when you're not around, everything feels louder. The noise, the pressure, the emptiness." Grace swallowed hard. She could feel the storm buzzing behind her ribs, not outside anymore. "I don't do casual," she said honestly. "I can't afford to. I have too much writing on me. My brother, my job, this little rent-controlled apartment that barely stays warm in December." He moved a little closer, not to trap her, but to let her know he was still there. "I'm not asking for casual," he said. "I'm asking for real. Scary, inconvenient, maybe it's impossible, real." She exhaled, heart pounding, and whispered, "I don't know how to do that anymore." He leaned forward, just enough for her to feel the warmth of his breath. "I'll learn with you." Then, finally, he kissed her. It wasn't rushed or possessive. It was the kind of kiss that asked permission with every second, that said, "I see you," that said, "You're safe here." She melted into him like a dam breaking. The hoodie slipped off her shoulder as his hand found the small of her back. Her fingers tangled in the fabric of his t-shirt. Everything outside, the thunder, the wind, the uncertainty, faded into the background. When they finally pulled apart, her forehead rested against his, and he whispered, "You didn't have to come tonight, but I'm really glad you did." She smiled, her voice unsteady. "I didn't know what I was looking for until I got here." They didn't rush anything else that night. They sat under a shared blanket, watching the fire die down, trading pieces of themselves in words and silence. It was warm and honest, and a little messy in the best way. At one point, she found herself curled against his chest, his heartbeat steady under her palm, and she realized something that scared her and thrilled her all at once. She didn't want to leave. Not the next morning, not even the day after that. Because for the first time in years, she felt like she wasn't just holding her life together, she was letting someone hold her. The morning after the storm, Grace woke up tangled in the warmth of Landon's arms, her cheek pressed to his chest. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. Rain still tapped softly on the windows, and for the first time in, maybe years, she felt weightless, like everything wasn't riding on her shoulders for once. But real life doesn't wait politely on the porch. It barges right in. By that afternoon, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, missed calls, emails. At first she ignored them, tucked into Landon's hoodie and sipping leftover cider while he made eggs and cracked dad jokes. But the third call from Theo was marked urgent. She stepped out onto the back porch to answer. "Grace?" Theo's voice was sharp. "You need to check Twitter, or whatever social thing you actually use." Grace blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Someone posted a photo of you in Landon from the gas station last week. It's viral now. They figured out who he is and who you are." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "They're calling you, I don't know. Some are calling you the Midwest Cinderella. Others think you're a nurse gold digger who played her way into a billionaire's world. And someone linked your hospital's GoFundMe. They're saying Landon paid it off for PR." Her mind went blank for a second. The sound of the rain faded. He didn't... Theo, he didn't do that. I know, but people don't care. They care about the story, not the truth. Grace leaned against the porch railing, the wood damp beneath her fingers. I never wanted any of this to be public. This wasn't supposed to be a thing people talked about. Theo's voice was gentler now. I know, but it is. Inside, Landon had already seen it. His phone was lit up on the kitchen counter, headlines scrolling in real time. Some praising him, some dragging her. One article said she wasn't what people expected a tech mogul's girlfriend to look like. And that's when it hit her like a punch to the chest. This, her, was the risk. She had told herself their worlds were too different, that eventually something would prove it. And here it was. Landon looked up from the screen, face unreadable, but not cold, just calculating. Like he was trying to find a solution before she even asked for one. I can fix this, he said. PR can put something out. We'll clarify everything. Say it's just a misunderstanding. Grace stepped back. Or you could say we're just friends and make it all disappear. His jaw tensed. Is that what you want? I don't want you to have to defend being with someone like me. Someone like you? He echoed, his voice rising just slightly. You mean someone real? Someone who's been more honest with me in 3 weeks than most people have in 10 years? She shook her head, overwhelmed. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't ask for any of it. I know. That's what makes you the only person I trust right now. The words hung there between them. And still, she pulled away. She didn't end it right then. But she left. Told him she needed time to clear her head. She went back to her apartment. Back to her routine. Clocked in for her shift like nothing had changed. But it had. The world had cracked open around her, and she was trying to pretend she could just sweep it up and keep moving. She tried to text Landon the next day. Stopped halfway through. What could she say? Sorry the internet hates me? Sorry I freaked out when things got real? The truth was, she was scared. Not of him, not even of the world, but of herself. Because for a moment, she had let herself want more, and now she wasn't sure if she was brave enough to keep wanting. 3 days passed. Then 4. No word. Until Theo came into her room on Sunday afternoon, tossed her a hoodie and said, You're coming with me. To where? Just trust me. They drove in silence to the university library where Theo had volunteered to give a student talk. She sat quietly in the back, waiting. Halfway through the Q&A, someone asked him about his sister. People say I got lucky, but I didn't. I got Grace, and she gave up a lot so I could have more. The audience clapped politely, but Grace's throat tightened. When they left, she finally broke. Why'd you make me come? Because, he said simply, you need to stop running away from things that make you feel seen. That night, she drove to Landon's place. Didn't call, didn't text, just showed up. He opened the door slower this time, his expression guarded. She stepped in anyway. I freaked out, she said, before he could speak. And instead of talking to you, I ran. That's on me. He nodded, but didn't speak. And I don't know how this works, Landon. I'm still scared, but I also know that the minute you held my hand, I felt safer than I have in years. His eyes softened. You didn't deserve any of what people said, but neither did I. So if this is still something you want, I'm here. For real. For inconvenient, for messy. She looked up at him, heart racing. Landon didn't say anything for a second. Then he stepped forward, took her face in his hands, and kissed her like the world had finally stopped spinning. When they pulled back, he whispered, "Took you long enough." She laughed through her tears. "You love me?" "I knew it the day you fell asleep in my car and mumbled something about hospital vending machines." Her smile was crooked. "You still owe me real coffee." He wrapped his arms around her. "Forever." It's been a year since Grace accidentally climbed into the wrong SUV outside the Cincinnati airport. A year since a storm, a couch, and a grilled cheese sandwich started something that neither of them saw coming, but both of them desperately needed. And now? Now Grace stands barefoot on the wooden porch of a tiny rental cabin in the Smoky Mountains, watching Theo teach Landon how to toast marshmallows without lighting them on fire. It's fall, Tennessee crisp and golden, the kind of air that smells like wood smoke, cinnamon, and new chapters. The three of them had come up for the weekend, a little getaway before Theo's college orientation. Grace didn't say it out loud, but part of her had been dreading this moment for months, the moment she'd no longer be raising her brother, but letting him go, letting herself be something besides the girl who carried everyone else's weight. Landon knew that, which is probably why he planned this trip with quiet care, just the three of them, no distractions, no press, no phones. Just forest and board games, and late-night grilled cheese with extra pickles the way Grace liked it. She still wasn't used to being cared for like that. Not in the little ways. But every time Landon pulled her blanket back up when she was half asleep on the couch, or remembered to bring her favorite chapstick from the drugstore, the cherry kind she never bought herself, she felt it. Real love. The steady kind, not the movie scene sweep you off your feet type. The stay kind, the wake up next to each other after fighting, but still choosing each other kind. Later that night, after Theo had passed out in the bunk room snoring like a bear, Landon poured them each a mug of cocoa and led her outside to the fire pit. "You okay?" he asked, passing her the mug. She nodded. "I think so. It's weird. Letting go." He bumped her knee gently with his. "He's not going anywhere. You raised a good one." I don't know who I am when I'm not responsible for someone." He turned to her, eyes soft under the firelight. "Then maybe it's time to find out." She looked at him, heart tightening like it always did when he said stuff like that, like he knew the parts of her that she didn't even know how to explain. Then he shifted on the bench, pulled something small from his hoodie pocket, and held it out between them. It wasn't a ring box. It was a folded piece of paper, wrinkled and creased like it had been read 100 times. She took it slowly. It was a receipt for a candy bar, 2 trail mix packs, and a bottle of water. From the gas station the day they'd run into each other again. She stared confused for a second, then smiled. "You kept this?" "I told you," he said with a grin. "That gas station had character." She laughed softly, already tearing up. Then he pulled the second thing out, a small ring box this time. "But I figured if I ever proposed to you, I wouldn't do it with some big show. I'd do it with something that meant something." Grace blinked as he opened the box. It was a ring, simple, elegant, with a small sapphire tucked beside the diamond. Not flashy, not loud, just like him, just like them. "I love you," he said, steady and sure. "I love the you who works 12-hour shifts and forgets to eat. I love the you who holds the world on her shoulders but still makes time to tease her brother about his ramen addiction. And I loved the you who didn't ask for a fairy tale, just someone who showed up. Grace was quiet, tears slipping down her cheeks. I can't promise a perfect life, but I can promise to love you in the hard moments, the boring ones, the real ones. Will you marry me? She was already nodding before she could say anything. Yes, she whispered. 1,000,000 times yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into his arms. And when she kissed him, it wasn't fireworks. It was warmth. It was a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. It was finally choosing herself and finding him standing there waiting. A month later, they got married in the backyard of the first little house they'd bought together. Nothing big, just close friends, family, Theo in a too-tight tie, officiating with a cracked voice and bad jokes. But when Grace looked around that day, at the folding chairs and sunflowers, at the string lights and mismatched potluck dishes, she felt full. Not perfect, just full. She held Landon's hand the whole ceremony, and when they danced under the stars to a scratchy speaker playing an old James Taylor song, she leaned in and whispered, "I never thought I'd get this." He kissed her temple. "You built this. I just showed up." And that was the truth. This love wasn't something that happened to her. It was something she let in. And in the end, that made all the difference. Sometimes love shows up in the most unexpected way, not with fireworks or perfect timing, but in quiet moments when we finally let our guard down. Grace and Landon's story reminds us that true love isn't about status, wealth, or grand gestures. It's about choosing each other, even when it's hard. Real love is built on honesty, vulnerability, and showing up for someone again and again. Because in the end, the heart wants what it wants. And when you know, you know. Love finds a way, especially when we're brave enough to let it in. If this story touched you, tell us in the comments. What part hit closest to home? Have you ever experienced an unexpected love or a moment that changed everything? Tap like if you believe in love that shows up when you least expect it. Subscribe for more soul-deep, heartwarming stories that remind us love is always worth the risk. And whatever you are on your journey, may love find you gently, honestly, and exactly when you need it most.